How's it going, everyone? In this video, I'm going to go over 3 tips that you can use to start rebuilding trust in your relationships if you've had some sort of instance that's made it really, really hard for you to trust people. And this is going to be important because if you don't get these things kind of figured out, you're not going to be able to develop new relationships in a healthy way. So I know a number of people, myself included, have had some sort of instance where they have had a relationship, developed trust, that trust was broken, and then it became almost impossible to trust anyone else. For me specifically, it was a romantic relationship, right? I had built up a lot of trust, found out a number of things were untrue or just basically a variety of broken trust issues, and it was really hard for me moving forward to trust anyone, right? Not just romantic relationships, but coming in contact with anyone. It made it really hard for me to sit there and go, okay, what this person is telling me is probably true. Now, the problem is if you are going around with that sort of mindset, you really close yourself off, right? And you lose a lot of opportunities because you're not willing to trust people at any level. So in this video, we're going to go over 3 different tips that you can use to start rebuilding trust in a way that's healthy. And then in addition to this video, there's also an article on howtohappy.com with some additional details and kind of a different angle. I didn't write it, so it's another perspective on sort of the same issue. So the first tip that you need to use when starting to rebuild trust is acknowledging the cause, right? You need to get into the details of whatever it is that made you feel bad enough that you no longer feel comfortable trusting people. And this may seem really simple, but a lot of times it's a topic that's avoided, right? I'll go back, to my personal example. It was a romantic relationship, and specifically, I had invested all kinds of resources and time into this relationship, and this person was just not telling me the truth about a number of things. Now, the reason it's important to understand the cause or why it is that your trust is broken and so hard to rebuild in a number of relationships is because without knowing kind of what led up to that or what the details were, you won't have any power to sort of protect yourself or make changes in the future or do anything different. And you need to acknowledge the cause so that you can kind of process the emotions and whatnot specific to that relationship, specific to that instance or circumstance, so it doesn't spill out into everything else. Because by default, what's going to happen is you're going to have this experience and you're going to go, you know what, I can't trust anyone, so I'm not going to trust anyone with anything. Where in reality, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, and it really matters who you trust and how you trust. So when you get into this kind of mindset, you can really start getting hurt by things that are really, really small and focusing on things that are less important because you've had this past experience of a much, much bigger thing, and then it just kind of muddies the water. So there is a bit of nuance, and acknowledging the cause gives you the ability to parse out exactly what it is that happened and why it hurt so much, because you don't want, someone forgetting that they took 3 pieces of chocolate when they really took 4 and having that be something that breaks a relationship apart when, it's really not a big deal. But when you have this past hurt, it can kind of combine with these other instances that are smaller to create a lot of pain and really rip things apart. So first things, acknowledge the cause, start working through some of those feelings and emotions. Now, the second tip is that you need to work to maintain your other relationships, right? It goes along with kind of acknowledging the cause. Like I was saying, you can start having these feelings spill out into other relationships. So you can say, oh, you know what? This person lied to me. So now I think this person is lying to me, and this person is lying to me, and this person is lying to me. And how can I trust this person? Because this one person that I trusted a lot broke trust. I don't trust anyone anymore. So when you get into that mindset, you can start deteriorating all your relationships really quickly, which is even worse because you've already had this one bad instance or circumstance. So it's really important that you work to maintain your existing relationships, right? You reach out to the people that you do trust, that you do have strong relationships with, that you make sure to kind of fight these sort of thoughts that start bubbling up, as in, oh, maybe this person didn't go to this place like they said they would, or maybe these people want to spend time without me and they're lying to me. You need to really get ahead of some of these thoughts and think about alternatives, think about what's the most likely, and make sure that you're not letting these past experiences sort of color everything else. Because again, it's a case-by-case instance. Every person is an individual, and the most useful way to kind of gauge your relationships is as a whole, right? You can't take what one person has done and suddenly say, oh, well, this other person is definitely going to act this way too because this person did this thing. Now, again, this is easier said than done, right? I know that. The thing that you can do is sort of reduce the number of situations that have really big trust aspects built into them, like really big investments, things like that, and sort of build your way back up. Because there is hurt and it does take time to sort of get back into the swing of things. Now, on to the third tip. You do not have to trust everyone equally, right? As I was saying, in the last one, the holistic picture of the relationship is really important. And one of the things that you can do is sort of slowly build up trust and make sure that it's targeted to each person, right? So if you had some sort of trust broken in a financial way, you might want to be a little bit tighter about your finances. But the way that you can do this without it kind of negatively impacting your other relationships is to slowly sort of, okay, I'm going to sign up for this thing and see how it goes. I'm going to let this person borrow $5 and see how it goes. I'm going to let this person do this thing. And there may be limits that you want to impose, right? The way that your trust was broken originally, you may not want to ever set yourself up in a situation like that again. Like if someone stole your entire life savings, you may not want to open that back up. But there are smaller degrees of trust that you can build out. And again, it goes back to this holistic picture of the relationship, right? Just because one person did something that hurts you does not mean every single person is going to act like this, and you need to consider the whole relationship. So again, it's about this balance of kind of knowing, okay, these are the relationships I've developed with each individual person. This is the level of trust. These are the situations I'm willing to get myself into, and starting kind of slow and not risky and building up is going to be a much more safe and realistic way to continue to maintain relationships moving forward. In addition to that, you may trust certain people with certain things within categories, right? You may trust someone with money and not trust them to watch your kids or something like that. And that's totally fine too. That's another piece of the nuances, understanding where people are or not responsible. For the most part, you're not going to have experiences with people being malicious, right? Especially if you're only putting out a little bit of resources or allowing the relationship to develop slowly and keeping kind of a track of what it is that you are putting out there. But for the most part, you're not going to run into things that are malicious. A lot of times what it's going to be is a problem with responsibility. So another piece of this is kind of paying attention to that. And then, of course, as you're developing a relationship and you do let some trust come out in certain aspects, paying attention to how people respond to that and act with that and what they do. Because, you will want to see how people are acting. Now, that doesn't mean that you should automatically go to the worst case scenario, right? Going back to kind of maintaining these relationships, you don't want to allow these thoughts to just crush you and overwhelm all your interactions, but you do want to be mindful and you do want to pay attention to what it is people are doing. Now, the last piece is that trust really takes time to build, and that's regardless of if it's being rebuilt or built for the first time, or if it's around kind of setting boundaries. All of these things take time, and it takes effort, and it takes energy, right? The tips I've given seem easy-ish, right? It seems like things you can just implement, but there is a lot of work that needs to happen, especially when you really get hurt in a deep way. So don't feel like you're taking too long or that it's too slow or that you should be able to just snap and flip on a dime. These hurts can go really deep emotionally and can be triggered by all kinds of things, which is, why that's one of the points is to try to get that under control. But it makes sense to have these sort of trigger points for a while and to kind of work down through them. So don't be concerned if it takes a while to start building up some of these relationships. And again, start small, work your way up. All right, on to the reflection questions. 1. When is a time that your trust was broken? How did it impact you? 2. Think back on a time you distanced yourself from others because you were afraid of your trust being broken. How could you have approached that situation instead? All right, so that's all I've got for this video. Hopefully that helps, if you've had your trust broken, give you a couple ideas on how you can start rebuilding relationships, start unworking some of the pain and processing what it is that's happened to you in a way that's not going to leave you vulnerable, but will give you a little bit more control over how your relationships go and give you a little bit of a more fruitful long-term investment. That's all I've got. So, as always, if you have any questions, comments, topics you want me to cover, throw them down in the box below. I will get to them as soon as I can, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe, as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com. And if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well. And that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.